He travels the country with the Monster Panel, a traveling event produced and moderated by him, focused on Black sci-fi. Let's give it up for Jeff. All right, great to have you both. Thank you. Okay, let's begin. First, I would like for each of you to share some initial reactions to the documentary Horror Noir in your own relationships with Black horror. Let's start with Ms. April.
Okay. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. So, man. Okay. So I watched this earlier today, and I think for me, there are so many threads in it. But I think first and foremost, like as an educational piece, because it's like I love Black films. I'm a Black filmmaker. I'm not the biggest lover of horror. I love sci-fi. I love zombies. I love sci-fi, zombies, vampires. I can't do spirits or demons. That's just too much for me. Like I grew up in a haunted house. Is the best way to let you guys know. So it's too close to home. But like for me, this doc is great because it sort of like charts like Black presence in films. And I think it's one of those documentaries where when you see it like in a group like this, it's like we all know like the first Black person to die and like all of those tropes and things. But when you actually see how intentional it is, like how intentional the absence is, how intentional the portrayals are, it like sort of puts something together for you. So for me, this is like a doc where I can reference to people when they ask, oh, what is the magical Negro? And they want me to be an educational Negro. I can say, go educate yourself. Go watch this movie, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And Jeff, your thoughts?
Well, I'm a horror person. I'm not horrible, but I'm a horror fan, and I'm all levels of it. I like the high horror and the low as Freddy and Jason and all of Leatherface, you name it. And I'm Black, and I like that part of the Black experience. So my initial reaction from it, this is actually the first time I saw it. I was trying to get it from my library, trying to get it every kind of way, and I'm really excited to check it out. I do like the fact that it chronologizes us in film. I actually, had studied a couple of those films in there, and I saw a bunch of those films in the theaters myself, especially Death by Temptation. I used to be a film reviewer, and that was the first movie that I got to review in publication, a big red newspaper out of Brooklyn, New York. As a horror writer and a horror filmmaker, I think it's important. I think there was parts of it, like especially when they were talking about John Boyega in Attack the Block. I was like, these are the same things that I say over and over again. How happy it is to have seen some of these tropes getting evolved, and I almost shed a tear just watching John Boyega become that next level of Black character in film.
Okay, we can start with you, Jeff, for this first question. Second question, please. How can we use horror or Black artistry to move the needle politically in this country for Black people?
Well, I think part of what we call Black horror is also part of sci-fi, right? I wear a shirt that says I love sci-fi all the time, and that's because I like the ability to pique thought. My second movie was a horror, and it was called Goldie the Killer, right? And this is written in 2003, before the Me Too movement, and I was in my second year of marriage, and I had gotten frustrated with the world of relationships between men and women. And hip hop dating, you had Players, you had Kanye West singing about I don't want no gold digger, and I'm from New York, so in 96 we had Funkmaster Flex came out and said no drinks in 96. Dudes ain't gonna buy girls no drinks no more because they're taking your drink and they walking around with other guys and they laughing at you because you a sucker. And then you had girls, so it was like this unofficial war. Girls was trying to get money from guys without sleeping with them. Guys was trying to sleep with girls. And I jumped in there, and I had been a nice guy, I had never cheated on any of my girlfriends, and I had no children until after I got married. But I had to deal with this woman that had all this baggage from a guy that had cheated on her, or somebody she had seen or read, or her parents, or her uncle, or whatever it was, she had gotten scorned from a distance. So I wanted to use horror to make guys scared to do that to women. So I made a serial killer that went and did Lorena Bobbitt's on just guys that was disrespectful to women, you know, and it did very well. And it was something that was organic to me. It wasn't about black or white, and that's one of the things I think that we've kind of graduated from in terms of it just being response horror, that we can now deal with our own elements, because there's something that is useful in horror. Many of us do good as Christians or Abrahamic religions because we're scared to do bad and go to hell when we die. So even our religions, you know, fear of God in you, that's what compels a lot of people to do good. It's not the law of God, no, it's the fear of God. So fearing is very important, and horror depends heavy on fear, and I think that's important for us. So when we're talking about some of the things that we need to address socially and correct in our world, yeah, I'm about the strong black family. I want us to be happy and live together so our children can go off to school, so any of that. So that's some of the things.
So for me, like as a filmmaker, I think in general, so I love sci-fi, I'm a Trekkie, old, new, all of them. I love Afrofuturism, like looking into the future and like where blackness is situated in those places. But you're like how, okay. So one of the things, the qualms, is there anyone here from this movie?
You can speak freely.
Okay.
From the documentary or
Yeah,
movie?
from the documentary. So one of the qualms that I do have, like it does end on an optimistic note, but I almost feel like it ends on the same note of the Obama being elected thing, where it's like, oh, the barriers are gone. And I'm like, that's a lot. But you know, it's great to feel like things are changing and shifting. I think for me, the challenge, and I think the thing that I want people to get the most, is that when you're creating as a black artist in general, you're never sort of like untethered. I just watched Us today, so.
Yes, love.
But you're never free of the shackles.
Right.
So like in the writing room, like I'm a writer, I do it like naturally for like it's documentary, whatever it is, whatever we're creating, I'm working and generally bouncing off of other artists of color. And there's always this moment where you're just like, so my character is talking to me and the character's doing this, but it's a black male and I just can't have him be. And so we always feel like you have to weigh what the character is doing versus the color of the character versus your obligation to your people, and versus countering the narratives that are already out there. So I think one of the things people don't think about, like white writers are free to write about whatever they want to write about. And if they get it wrong and everybody bitches about it, they still got to do it and they got to fund it. Us, it's like you're constantly tied to like all of these things. So it's like you see in the movie, it's like Oscar Michaud, there's this whole movement that was like a whole civil rights movement called moral suasion, where it was, and there were a lot of Southerners who sort of bought into it, where it was like, if we can be good enough and act good enough, they will treat us as human. It's like if we dress a certain way, and that's why we were always dressed up. Like the Southerners you see in the South, they're always in their church clothes if they go out. Their hair is always just so, that you have to speak properly or be able to code switch, know when you're supposed to code switch, and then they'll accept us. So there's that sort of like element that plays in the Oscar Michaud movies, and I think for a lot of creatives today, we're kind of like, there's never going to be a full acceptance of us, right? Like there's never going to be a full acceptance of us. Like we can get closer and closer and closer and closer and closer, but in a lot of ways we have to like craft our own narratives and pave our own way. And I think one of the things I liked about Us, just watching it today, was like, it's the little things that sort of like permeate. The little things like the main black daughter, like the small version who goes into the House of Mirrors, her hair. I was like, we all have a hairstyle. The part down the middle with the bobbles, and it's like before you're too young to get your hair chemically straightened.
Right.
So it's like before your hair is permed, probably straightened in some way, maybe with a hot comb, we don't know. But it's like you're too young to get a perm, and it still has the like puffiness. And the whole time I'm watching it, I'm like, I've never seen this hairstyle in a movie, the hairstyle from my childhood.
Right.
And it's crazy, right? Like, and then also like the lighting. But then for me with Us, it was just like, they're just a regular family, but blackness was a part of who they were.
Absolutely.
So like the Howard sweatshirt, the hair, but they're on vacation. You know, they don't talk about blackness.
Right.
And I think he fools us in a way in that in the beginning, you think somehow this has to do something with race. You know, until the second family comes in and you're like, oh shit, it's happening to everybody.
Right.
You're like, this is a black thing. What is
Right.
this? I'm like, what is this saying about black people in America? Because at some point the character says, we're American. I'm like, oh shit, what is this saying? Like, what's the big racial narrative here? And it's like, no, there's no big racial narrative. It's just us. It's just us. Yeah.
There we go, it's just us. Love it. For Jeff, it seems that we are entering or have seen a renaissance of black film and artistry. Do you think we're in a moment in this country where black film and art is blossoming?
I do think that it's not just black film, but what makes it seem like it is black film is that we do still have gatekeepers, right? And they're really not as in control of the gates around the fort as well as they used to. Black horror, and as black creators, black film, black science fiction, is surviving and thriving in the independent market. Now we have streaming services. You can make a movie and put it up on YouTube, get a certain amount of subscribers. After you have your web series, for a few views, you get over 1,000 subscribers. Now you can monetize it. That defeats the gatekeepers, right? So now the excuse of I can't do this is only limited to I can't do this and get to big budget theaters. But you actually can do it. Now I span probably the middle to current era of film. And I actually got to shout out my man Patrick here, who plays the horror killer in my third movie that we just shot last year, The Death Pledge. So he plays Baba the Killer in there. So y'all can acknowledge Patrick. But as a writer or as a creator, the gatekeeper element was really a big a monkey over your head. And when I made my first movie, it was 2003, and I went to Hollywood Video, and we succeeded there. I had a distributor that spoke the language of horror and saw, a killer of comedians as a non-racial, as a broad appealing, broad appealing, but it was still speaking to, falling off and not being good. And I had worked with comedians for 15 years by the time, and I had seen Chris Rock do something at Def Comedy Jam where he dissed a comedian named Shucky Ducky. And I was like, Dad, what's Shucky Ducky gonna do with the rest of his career, And it was like on stage, and he didn't get his set didn't air, and I was like, oh my God, that's horrible. So I used that, and I broke onto that, and I had to get distribution. And by the time my second movie, Goldie Killer, came out, there were more interest in black horror on a straight to DVD level. Now my third movie, we aren't even worried about DVD. We're going straight to streaming services. And that's a lot more liberating. I'm actually shooting another movie which is like a hybrid between Get Out and Us, but I'm shooting it in July, and I'm probably going to just go streaming services directly without even worrying about it. And that freedom to get my most independent and organic thoughts to an audience commercially, to be able to get it back is amazing. Even with GoFundMe, even with the crowdfunding methods that are out there, that gives you a little way to impact these gatekeepers. I mean, Spike Lee is famous for doing She's Gotta Have It with a lot of friends, and a lot of us don't have big money friends. He was able to call up Michael Jordan and say, yo, I got this movie. I can't do that, but I can go the Obama route and say, hey, GoFundMe, can you give me $5? And get me $5,005, and next thing you know, I got enough money to make a movie. So that's kind of, what I think, and I have something else to say later on, but yeah, that's kind of what I think in terms of the liberating elements of film production, filmmaking, to be able to get it straight to it, the Justin Bieber route, Put your song up there on YouTube, and next thing you know, you Chance the Rapper. And you don't have to worry about, a record company, and you put your middle finger up to them. Eventually we won't even need agents for basketball players. You know, they might just be like, I can ball, you want me to play on your team? I'll play for you. See my lawyers.
Can I pick, I don't remember the question.
Oh, no, that's wrong. Do you think that we are in a moment in this country where Black film and art are blossoming?
Okay. Okay. I want to piggyback off something that he said, and like, this, maybe like 2 weeks ago I was in LA and like at Sony Studios, like with the execs, and they were talking about the way that they market movies now and the movies that are attractive. So I think it's interesting the way that the genres have sort of flipped. Like horror always used to be this B-movie thing. As a kid I loved horror, I did. Like Nightmare on Elm Street, like all of those, you know, and then going into Blair Witch Project and those types of movies. But it sort of like always used to be like the romance novel of the movies. Like no one really respected, because you have like all these B horror movies that would come out that were always on like Sunday afternoon or whatever. But now the tables have sort of turned in that studio execs are like, nobody wants to go see a romantic comedy on a big screen in front. It costs too much. They'd rather just stay home and watch it on Netflix. They don't know if they're going to like it. The things that they will go to the theater to see are big special effects things, so you know, like Aquaman, 3D, whatever, Atmos, and horror, because they like the communal experience of being in the theater and being in the dark and being scared with a whole bunch of other people. And that was something that like coming from Sony is like, what? This is crazy. You guys don't want to do dramas anymore for the theaters, but you'll do a horror. So it's like the sort of like money-making pocket. And I think the thing about horror, like, that you sort of saw from Blair Witch Project is like, you don't need a lot of money. Like, you never needed a lot of money. Okay, I mean, some of the films we saw needed more money. Right? Like, it's not that they needed more money. But it's like, yeah, if you're doing like, you know, blood, but that's like sort of like a niche in and of itself, right? Like, we love that too. But I just think like now it's easier to do horror movies that resonate with people, that are creepy and scary, that don't necessarily cost a gazillion dollars. And I think that sort of has helped catapult Black filmmakers in the horror genre, in that now, like you said, there are more avenues, there are more revenue streams, like there are more ways to get in. And at the end of the day with Hollywood, it really is about the money. If you can show, like Jordan Peele is great because it's like he's just showing this can be mainstream, right? Like, so he's sort of like doing what Michael Jackson did with MTV. Like, I'm Black, this is music, this can be mainstream, and it can be profitable. And so, yeah, why not? You know, like, of course they're gonna jump on the pony because that's the pony that's running. So, I don't, in terms of like a renaissance, you know, there are so many renaissances and like people give them names, it's like the Harlem Renaissance and all this. I think that Black artists exist and are as equally talented and creative in as many pockets as white people are. It's just that people don't give us those podiums. We don't have the outlets. We don't get to express it outwardly. We know this amongst ourselves.
Right.
So it's like, now we just have more opportunities and more ways of getting in. Like you said, the gatekeepers, like we can work around them.
Right.
And if we can work around them and be profitable, then that money makes more money, and people like the Jordan Peeles are like, oh, I'm gonna redo this movie, or I'm gonna bring in these actors. So it just gives us more platforms. Yeah.
I just want to add on to that. One of the things that I think, you said it and made me think, I was like, I should have said it a long time ago. But we always talk Hollywood, and you know, if they can get this abortion thing correct in Georgia, we already know that everything doesn't always go through Hollywood. That we've got New York, we've got Atlanta, and now areas that are blossoming. But you know, in terms of what is kind of catapulting this, whatever we want to call it, whether it's upsurgence, is also that we are dealing with the fatigue of remakes. We are dealing with the fatigue of old ideas. I mean, it was just Snoop Dogg saying, a few years ago, saying, I don't want to see another slave movie, you know, and then we had these tropes of, you know, the black person dies. Well, at some point we were saying we were tired of the same old stories. And, you know, even if it's not black sci-fi or black horror, just because it's something other than what we've been getting, that opportunity is also what's fueling the black horror opportunity, because they bring a different element of story angle to tropes that we've already seen. So again, I don't know what Jordan Peele's gonna do with Candyman, but I do believe he's got to reboot that whole element. He's got to throw that all around. So again, I think just the deadening of ideas and the repetition of old stories, is also what has made an opportunity for Black horror filmmakers.
My last question before I turn it over to the audience. And April, you touched on this earlier during the first question. What are your thoughts on Jordan's Feels Us, if you could expand on it a bit, and what message did you get from it?
I'm still processing. I'm still processing so much. One, I thought the acting was spectacular.
Yeah.
It's like, the acting was great, right? Like, it's like, I'm a director, so I generally don't like actors, like, look, industry secret, you know, like, but especially child actors, and I think in that movie, it's just like the children were so good, like they were so creepy, they were so on point. The score was awesome, like not just that one song that was in the commercial that everybody likes, but like the whole score overall was like awesome. I think it's always amazing to me, like I love production value, so whenever I see things that are Black that have like stellar production value, it's like, but then I know I have to wait for the next Black film to have stellar production value. So it's like, you know, like Queen Sugar does that for me. Anything Ava DuVernay does that for me. Insecure now, not the web. The web version I love, but it didn't have the production value. Yeah, she got the funds now. But yeah, I don't know. That film for me was like, I am still, like I'm a little, has anyone not seen it? Okay, so okay, we'll talk around it. Like I haven't seen it until today, but like,
Okay, so it was your very first time seeing it?
today, yeah. Say it again.
What was the reason for the delay, and you just didn't get a chance?
I was gonna go see it in the theater, but I told you I have that weird horror thing.
Oh, okay.
So it's like,
Yeah,
I didn't know
right,
what
right,
kind of
okay.
horror it was, and I had to
Okay,
wait
okay,
to
okay.
hear what,
Right,
whether they were like.
Okay, need time.
Yeah,
Right, got it.
and so, and I was gonna watch it last night, but then I was like, oh, wait until daylight. Today.
Right. So these are fresh reactions.
Fresh.
Yeah.
But I actually like, I thoroughly enjoyed the journey. I think the thing about me is, I, as a human being, do not like to be manipulated. Like, and so that's why horror for me, I'm just like, bitch, come on. Why are you doing this? Like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this to me? And it's gonna be a fake scare. And like, I don't like all of that. Like, anybody playing with my emotions, I don't like it. And so for horror, I always end up feeling very resentful. Like, I can see the strings. And I'm like, you're leading me here so you can scare me, and I don't like that, right? So like, but with this movie, I just felt like it had a great like ambiance. It was sort of like smart, interesting. I still don't understand all the layers, but it's like one of those things where you get on the ride and you're like, this is cool, this is an interesting ride, you know? And then everyone, like when I read things, everyone was talking about the ending. And I'm still like, for real? What does that mean? For real? What the, like, you know, so yeah. That's a mess, I'm sorry. I was trying to like formulate.
No, Jeff, for you, what message do you think us was trying to get? So your reactions?
I can't remember who said it, that maybe Dave Chappelle or Chris Rock said Black people won't succeed until they can fail, right, in front of everybody or something like that. And for me, that is the reaction that I got from us, is that holy moly, somebody made a successful film that's Black that I can't understand. And that in itself is a success, you know, because usually the message has to be so telegraphed, so tap danced, so past the gatekeepers that nobody can pull a wool over the gatekeepers' eyes until us. And now we all dealing with, what did we watch? Where did they get the clothes from? All this other stuff, you know, so I have so many questions that, you know, my little movie reviewer, my son and my wife, we've scrutinized each other after we saw it, and we gave up. We just said, you know what? It is what it is, and just keep it moving. So I think that in itself is success, because I've seen, you know, mainstream movies that didn't always make sense either.
Right.
So for him, and people enjoyed it. So for that, I'm thinking, cool. All right, maybe we got some type of milestone. My movies will make sense.
Do we have time for audience questions? Okay, perfect.
No, we have time.
Okay, perfect.
I was raising my hand.
Well, fine, host privilege. Okay, so yes, we're gonna take a few questions from the audience, and if I have to understand that we have some actors, some creatives, some filmmakers.
Oh, sorry, actors.
So
All back.
you're some type of creative actor, please shout out your, we wanna give you full platform to please shout out your project or your Instagram, whatever, when you ask the question, so we wanna shout you out at some point, but it's cool.
First off, is there like a playlist, like a YouTube playlist of all the movies that were mentioned in the film? I was like, I wasn't taking notes.
Well, one of the gentlemen on there I actually know, who had put a platform called blackhorrormovies.com, and he has both of my movies on there, but I don't know if the site is still up. But I think the documentary also has a playlist as well. So you can go in Google, right, and they may have it, but I know blackhorrormovies.com is one that you could definitely get.
You can also watch this. You can watch this film again on.
I'm definitely going to.
So it's on Shudder, which you need a subscription for. But if you have Amazon Prime, you can do a 7-day free trial. Just one click, sign up, and then cancel it, which is what I did today. To watch it.
That part.
Yes, and to watch it again and like write down all the references.
Perfect. Anyone else?
Oh, he got it perfect.
Okay, cool. Yes, this one.
Hi, yes, I noticed that, what's her name again? I'm so sorry.
April.
April? Yes, I noticed that, she said that you were from Alabama and, they just passed a really bad anti-abortion, bill, and I noticed that statistically, the media doesn't do a very good job at bringing up sexual assault among Black women as well. So I was just wondering, is there a possibility for a horror film that has to do with young Black women going through the abortion process? Because I noticed the film brought about like certain events, historical events, and right now that's the historical event that's going on, and a lot of Black women, especially young Black women, like are going to be affected. So I'm just wondering, is that an idea that you guys are thinking of? And when you brought it up, I was like, oh my goodness, like yes, that would be a great. Yeah, that's a horror of our time, you know. Even like there was articles about like 11-year-olds having to be forced into motherhood. So I'm just wondering if that's an idea, something on the table.
No, I think that is fertile ground for a horror film. I mean, I don't live in my state for a reason. Although I have to say Florida's not much better. Like, Miami's great, but like in terms of like legislation, not. But I think yes, but I'm not doing it. Like it's one of those things where it's like I feel like someone would need to do it I would love for a woman to do it, number one. But who understands the issues and also understands the South, because one of my big things with, just Southern representations in horror movies and film in general is just that we're all sort of like idiots, bumbling backwards and all this stuff. And there are a lot of me's there, like I'm not an idiot, not bumbling backwards. Very forward thinking. So I would like to see like some nuance in those characters if they do exist, and also like nuance in the discussion. Like there are a lot of Black older Southern women in Alabama who are like kick-ass like advocates who are people's grandmothers, like who are driving people to the polls and like organizing. So it's like those people are on the ground. I just like to see them represented too, if that happened, if you write it.
I'll say, maybe not with the current legislation, but certainly with the subject. It's been around since I was a virgin, right? And my movie Goldie Killer, part of her motivation is within that fertile conversation of legalized abortion and pre-legalized abortion. And I have a turkey baster scene, and there's another scene in there at the very beginning of the movie because it frames her desperation. But there's a really big abortion scene in there that my female actresses, which I don't even say I cast it, I just drafted, because I picked girls and friends that I knew had a relationship to the characters. And one of the lines that the actress rewrote and just ad-lib was, just vacuum this out of me, and I was like, wow, for me, it was my frustration with the whole community and how we hear people abusing the system. And it wasn't a direct hit because it wasn't what the whole movie was about. But because some issues are not isolated and they deal with a lot of other issues, that was a issue that was related to my whole story. And without that, the motivation and the seriousness of what the character was going through would not have been felt. But you know, it's coming back out in October. I got a re-release, so that's cool. But maybe in another character, 'cause I'll use any subject, and I can throw it in one of my books or any of mine, so it may pop up again.
Hey, this is Asa. So I loved Get Out and Us, and Get Out specifically, I think was a movie that didn't necessarily have to be a high budget movie because there wasn't like a lot of blood or guts or killing. It was just a movie that had really good intention put into it, a good plot, and a good story, right? That almost anybody could have made, right? And people could have been gripped by it. And I also really like how Jordan Peele in Us and in Get Out, and people are doing this in a lot of other black films, and Luke Cage and different black films, but having blackness just be on display and very present in ways that black folks identify with. So like you said, the Howard shirt, having black vinyls of like Curtis Mayfield and like all of these different folks up, that just puts our blackness on display so that you connect not only with the characters, but you connect with the culture that's kind of inside of the movie, which I really loved. And I got a lot of that, I feel like back in the day when I was watching Different World, right? It's like you just see all of these things and you just feel really good because it's like you never really see black culture on display like that. Which is different, I think, than the conversations and the emotions that you get, but just to see it. So I just wanted to know, how are you all, I would love to have a conversation with you all about Us afterwards too. But how are you all inside of your movies giving folks that like implicit black culture and giving folks also just overt black culture, right? How are we giving that to folks in ways that isn't necessarily always in their face, but you know, we're making it normal, right?
I'll say this, from the very inception of my stories, I am approaching horror from a different angle. I wrote an article that said, the title was Black People Should Not Read H.P. Lovecraft, right? And I'm a big sci-fi community guy. H.P. Lovecraft has been the celebrated person in science fiction for a long time. He's the author of characters of necromancy, The Walking Dead. All these zombies come from his element, right? And that's all cool. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't read them per se, but I'm saying you shouldn't let those tropes dominate your creativity. So when I think, like in my movie, The Death Pledge, right? It's a story about the tagline is, if you don't respect the dead won't respect you. Now, that means that dead isn't inherently bad. But in H.P. Lovecraft and Western horror, you say dead, you say haunted, you say ghost, run. That's synonymous with that. But then when I deal with black culture or hybrid African culture, right, throughout the Caribbean or on the continent, you say dead, it might be your uncle. It might be grandma. What are our ancestors supposed to do, right? Protect us. I stopped being scared of the devil after my grandmother died because I said, oh, somebody loves me, is up there, and she's gonna advocate for me. When I was young and I used to go vacation in Virginia and a door would slam or noise would come from somewhere else, we say, oh, that's such and such, don't worry about it. That ghost comes around here all the time. And it was a different approach to the dead, to after. And I think for black people, that is our culture. But we sometimes follow some of these old tropes, and I'll say it, maybe the dead gets a bad rep. Because to me, I believe The dead are as good and bad as people are alive. So if you're good alive, you can be good as a bad person, because I feel my parents are looking out for me. I feel my family, all of them are looking out for me. And I'm not the only person that thinks that way. So in my book, It Happened on Negro Mountain, that's a reverse Amityville horror. It's a ghost that protects the mountain. Bad people, good ghost. Same type of scenario. Whereas in the H.P. Lovecraft narrative, you have Amityville horror. Good people, regular ghosts, because all ghosts are bad. So that's their narrative. So I approach it from a different angle. And I think if we start looking at our culture as an opportunity to provide contrast, then we have a whole lane that we can run down. And it'll be like watching Godzilla being interpreted by the Asian community, which he's a god, and then by the Western community, he's a monster. Variation. I think that's what we really can bring to the horror conversation.
I want to shout out your reference to A Different World and how it changed my life. As a, okay, so this is weird. This is a weird personal story that I should probably not share with people, strangers. But when I was a kid, so I wanted to be an actress. And I was an actress for a long time, did plays and all that kind of stuff. But so I grew up in super rural Alabama, farmland, no neighbors, no sidewalks. I used to dream about having sidewalks. And my brother and sister and I used to talk about we could skate, and then we had neighbors, we'd go across the street. Because we didn't have that TV thing. So we just thought we would daydream about sidewalks. And one of the things for me was in watching shows and always act performing in my mirror and that kind of thing, is that I didn't realize that this was an issue until maybe I was 13. But in my daydreams, when you're dreaming yourself performing or in this story or whatever, I was always a white woman. And it wasn't that I thought of myself as white or that I wanted to be white. I was very much immersed in a Black culture, but it's my little kid brain knew that in order to be in this narrative, you have to be this one. I can still see her. She's a brunette bob and whatever, very but in my dreams, if I was dreaming about being on a show or acting, that's the person that would manifest. And that was normal for me until I was 13, and I was oh shit, I'm dreaming, this is really fucked up. This is really fucked up. This is how your brain is. And I never really thought about it. For me, things like A Different World, The Cosby Show, I know The Cosby Show now, sorry.
There's more to do.
But it's one of those things where you finally seeing yourself, but all different versions. You have the hippie Black chick, you have the I'm a Delta Black chick, you have and all of the different layers of Blackness. And I think we're talking a lot about representation. For me, one of the things about us, and also Get Out is different, but one of the things about us is this whole family is brown skinned, brown to dark skinned. And it's in a glorious way, not brown to dark skin, you are Patty from 12 Years a Slave or whatever. It's just normal Blackness. And for me, I think one of the things that a lot of times, as Black people when we're watching things, we know that colorism is a thing and it exists. I think sometimes when you're not as informed about the way that things work in the Black culture world, you don't realize, you see Blackness as a presence and you say, that's one there, that's one there, that's one there. But one of the things I always see is the light-skinned Black woman with European features and Missandei of Noir, from Game of Thrones. She's gorgeous, but she has a look, and that's the look. The Zoe Kravitz, there's the brown paper bag test. They all pass the brown paper bag test.
Yeah.
And so the presences that I've seen as a woman have always been that woman that was questionable. That one movie that they showed where I'm is that woman blonde? Is that Vanessa Williams?
Rachel True.
I don't remember which movie it was. But she was the lead character. She was kind of Patrick Jones-ish. No, older.
Embryo.
Say again?
Yeah,
No, it was not
It
Kimber.
was the other.
Yeah.
Sugar Hill?
Sugar Hill. Yes. I'm that's the woman. Yes. It's Vanessa Williams. It's so it's
Okay,
yeah. So for me, something like Us shifts in that if you have a Black director who's casting, they know that. There's a presence of mind where it's oh, you know what, I also have to think about color, all of my, like I just did a short film, whatever, it doesn't matter, but I just did a short film, and in the casting, one of the things that it's like we wanted the family to look alike. It's a black family, but like, there was a point where we're like, are they all too light skinned?
Yeah.
Like, are we doing that thing? Like, they're all light skinned, they have sort of like, are we doing that thing that we do where it's like we defer to like whiteness as being the standard or the norm? And this is the double questioning, so there's always this questioning, like you can't just go with your artistic intent or your gut, because I think as a white creator, or I don't know, I'm assuming because I'm not white, obviously. But it's like, there's a lot more freedom to just manifest what you're thinking and what you're creating. And this is just from being in screenwriting classes and what I've witnessed. And as a black creative, it's like, no, whatever you're manifesting and creating, we know that comes from somewhere. And white people forever have been telling us, oh no, this is just the way it is. This is historically accurate. This is da 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 da. And we as people of color know that's all based in something. Like your fantasy, like your dream, your fears, they're all based in socio-cultural, political things. And I think creatives on the other side don't necessarily want to acknowledge that we can't get away from that.
Right.
So we sort of have to be rooted in that in some sense. So anyway, I don't know what my point was. It's gone. Everybody's gone.
You said a lot.
It's over. Done.
One more question.
You know, I just want to first thing I want to say, I hate racism. I hate it with a passion. To understand black people, you gotta understand its history, and black people in America don't even understand themselves, because horror movies and all different types of media put us out there that we're inferior, that we can't be business owners, that we can't be in charge of anything. I was looking at your books when I first walked in, and I said, "Oh, you the author?" I asked you, I said, you said, "Yeah." And I was really proud about that. You know, I love seeing beautiful black, intelligent black brothers and sisters doing their thing, and you're in a position, you guys in a position to do something. Won't you make a horror flick combating racism? Like John Hanson coming back from the grave in the modern times. John Hanson is technically the first black president, not of Barack Obama. John Hanson was the president of the Articles of the Confederacy, which is the oldest documents in the United States history. There's 8 presidents that came before George Washington. John Hanson also set up our government, democracy. A lot of people don't know that. I think, don't make up a movie, John Hanson come back from the grave, in this modern time, and just killing, race. I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, that's an idea. I got a bunch of ideas, but I'm just saying, use this media, this horror, sci-fi media. I'm a big time sci-fi person, big time. Use this media to show the glory. You know what? Black Panther was a great movie that showed the glory of black people. It showed the intelligence, the glory of black folks. You know, it's amazing that black people are getting into so many different things. Your AC that you enjoy in your car. We live in a horror flick. As soon as I leave from here, I'm gonna worry about the police pulling me over and thinking about he gonna shoot me. You know, we wake up to a horror movie every day. But I would just say, you know what? Is there anything in your plans where you can combat racism and teach our audience about the glory of black people instead of like, oh, we gotta be pimps, and that gets on my last nerves, man. I mean, we're way better than that. And I mean, just use your medium to know what, say, you know what, look at the glory of black folks. You know what, hey, bring John Hanson back from the grave, you know, and you know, start tearing people up, you know what I mean? That's how, I mean, so if that anything in your plans where we can and educate our children, psychologically, we've been damaged. You know what I mean? We've been damaged psychologically. Every time we see ourselves, we have to see ourselves below, not something that we can cherish ourselves. Like, oh man, we can't do that. Oh, only a white person can do that. That's not us. No, that's not us. No, listen. So only for America to stand, we got to stand together. That's it. That's all I got to say.
So funny because you sound like me.
Yeah.
Talking to myself. You know, I'm listening to you and I'm having an out-of-body experience. And that's really cool. I mean, I remember when what's the Birth of a Nation was remade. right?
Okay.
And I can't remember his name.
That's it.
No,
Um,
the one who
Nate
made
Parker.
it, Nate Parker, right? And I was like, despite what was going on in his world, I wanted to see Nat Turner. Because I was like Snoop Dogg, I'm tired of the defeatist
Right.
slavery stories. And I remember when I first got into sci-fi, I was like, golly, all these guys, every writer felt like they had slavery in this story. And I kept saying, oh, we didn't start in slavery, we go back. They had aliens coming to Earth. Guess what time they came? During slavery. I was like, in America. I was like, oh my God, my son is playing Call of Duty and he's shooting down Nazis. And I was like, I can't even shoot a Klansman in any of my stories. I was like, so at least when I see Nat Turner, I want it to be the Braveheart version. I was like, yo, when it's Nat Turner, I want him to start the movie with his foot on top of a dude, white dude, and blowing his brains out, and then retell the beginning of how he got there, and then maybe for like 10 minutes, and then show the rest of the movie still him slaying, and like 90 minutes of straight revolution. Everything else you can catch in a textbook, but I want that feel-good movie. So I'll say yes, I do. But have those desires and those dreams, but I've graduated beyond that, and I really use film and stories and comic books for like escapism, I actually feel like one of the things Jordan Peele said is that I don't even acknowledge racism. Not that I have friendly white people in my stories, but my stories are so Wakanda that they're not really even involved in my stories. My conversation are between black, brown people, Latino people, and white people come in, but it's not between black and white people. That's too limiting for me. I have space stories where we don't even deal with white people, okay? I don't even have time to kill them. So it's not a retaliation story. I have a scientist, my story, Rashida the Zombie Killer. I'm just dropping some names at you, but you can come back and check out more. But Rashida the Zombie Killer finds an Egyptian musical device that cures ADHD, Parkinson's, lupus. No white scientist is involved. No white villain is involved. That's us. It's a zombie apocalypse. You know what I'm saying? But again, it's not, the white person found it and we got to take it from the white person. Or I had a story where I wanted to, have some black Indiana Jones and steal all of our treasures back from the British Museum and all these other places. But I ain't have time for that. I'm writing original black colleges. I'm in the post-apocalypse. I got survivors of organizations of black people, that I'm thinking of. So that's my world that I'm in. So I would invite you to join me. But we do have some stuff that deals directly with it, just to get that little feel good out of the way. I got a Black Caesar story where he's a black pirate sailing the seas, and his biggest villain is Christopher Columbus. And you know what? It's not fiction. He was a real pirate.
That's right.
He was the one that followed Blackbeard when
That's
they took
right.
him out in North Carolina. He got a treasure right down here on Biscayne, Coral Reef, right outside where the Heat play. He got a trophy down there near the university. A statue down there by the University of Miami. So we've got real stories of rebellion and championship. You know what I'm saying? That we can dwell on.
Right. We
can say Nat Turner was finally caught in the credits. But in the movie, he's still winning.
Right. Gotcha.
I think the root of your question is, so I think one of the challenges as a black creator is that then you sort of become responsible for telling all the black stories. And I try to, as much as I have my own internal dialogue about blackness and black stories and my characters, in my mind, I have a calling and I have a mission, and I do those stories that are calling to me because that's how I can work. Part of the challenge then is that I have a whole community of people who are calling me like my aunts and uncles. Who are like, D, I have a story idea. Hey D, why don't you make a movie about this? Hey D, why don't you? And so it's like there's so many black stories out there. So I'm just like, you make that movie. you write that story, you do that thing. Like, I can't do all the Black stories, right? That's the way I think about it. And it's not my job to do all of it. Just like it's not my job to educate all of the people who don't know, right? And I think part of that for me has become a self-care thing, because it used to be that I would try to take on all of these things. And now I'm like, no, I'm one person. The only person I have to take care of is my daughter. The only thing I have to pay for is her livelihood and her food and our things. And everything out that I do extra outside of that is because I want to do it and I'm driven to do it. And if you want to do something and are driven to do it, do it. Like, and so, but that's not to say, like, I think one of the difficult things about, like, the framing of that is that I don't think that the negative stories have to come out. I love darkness. Like, my stories are always dark. My characters are always dark. They're really fucked up. They do fucked up shit. They're serial killers. Like, in the narrative world. Like, I like playing in the lines of, like, the twisted, like, you know, as a child, Edgar Allan Poe was my favorite. Like, I was very much a poet, like, wearing all black and, like, doing whatever. But so for me, it's like, I like delving into those things. But I think in terms of Blackness and representation, it's not about one or the other, it's about a balance. So if we have all of those strong characters and strong representations, you can still have rappers, and I love rappers, you know,
I'm a hip-hop, so.
but pimps, and, like, you know, like, you can still have the things that we saw on screen, but you need a counterbalance, and we don't have a big enough counterbalance so that we're just like normal people. And that's, I think, the issue. And then, like, I wanted to go back to Asa said something about how are we doing these things in our work. The work that I'm doing right now is a feature-length film called Alabama Land, and it's basically it's a documentary, so it examines the history. My family has a 688-acre farm in Alabama. It's the farm that I grew up on, and it was part of the original plantation that we worked on as slaves, but my family owns it. The slave bell, the bell that was in the bell that's in my yard now, in our yard now, was the same bell that was used to call the slaves in from the field. So it's like we live on top of, it's a palimpsest is what I call it. Like, we live on top of all these layers. It's a very Southern thing. And for me, like, I'm doing this documentary from a decidedly Southern Black insider lens, but it examines the role of women on a farm in Alabama. And it's a Black family farm, so it's like Black women farming, like, they're inextricably linked, but there's never been a documentary where it's like, here's a Black Southern documentary about farming from a Black woman's perspective, right? So for me, the way that I do it is I sort of like to tell stories from the inside out, people that I know and that I'm familiar with, because I feel like with Southern stories, they're always told by outsiders. And with Black Southern stories in particular, like, we've never been able to sort of like have that power over the tellings. And when I first started doing the documentary, my whole thing was just that I sort of wanted to do like what Zora Neale Hurston does in literature, and that, like, I want to time capsule the Black Southern experience for us. So if anybody else wants to jump on the train, that's fine. But, like, I want to capture the way that we speak to each other, the cadence, the rhythm, the way that we tell stories, the way that we sit on the porch. Like, I want that to be a beautiful thing that moves along in the future for us, for posterity's sake. So that's my mission, that's what I'm doing. And the way that I look at it is I have to chase that mission, and anything off that path is distracting from what I'm called to do in this world. And that's how I think about each individual story. It's like each individual story is a piece of myself that I'll be leaving here when I'm not here, and that I'll be passing down when I'm not here. And all of you have stories, so you should be doing those pieces too, right? Like, it doesn't have to be me or him that does it. Like, you can now make a movie from a phone. You can go to your grandparents or great-grandparents with an audio recorder and just take their stories. And maybe that'll serve you later, you know, but they're not always gonna be here forever. So that's sort of the way I think about filmmaking, collectively, like all of our stories.
Gotcha.
So you need to write that story. Basically what I'm saying. That's the gist.
Yeah, if there's any creatives, artists, filmmakers, can you stand up really quickly and just shout out your projects? We want to give you, anyone want to just stand up really quickly, say your name, and, you know, have an actor, audience. Please,
I met some
please,
people.
okay. Okay.
Don't be shocked by the name of my thing called Coke and Death. I don't do cocaine, but it's about, like, representation about, like, it's about, like, addiction. Everybody's addicted to something, you know what I'm saying? But it's just a little, something on Instagram, y'all want to follow it. It's called
Sorry, sir.
Oh, nobody heard it?
You heard it. On the mic.
I'm saying, don't be shocked by the name of the thing I have. It's called Coke Binge FM. It's about this, pretty much just about how dealing with addiction. Everybody's addicted to something. It doesn't have to just be drugs. It doesn't have to be. It can be like sex, running, exercise. Everybody's addicted to something. To food. You know what I'm saying? So it just my goal is to make stories about just how to cope with those things. It's just to remove. I think first of all, stigma of drugs is bad already in the first place. Like there's no reason why things should be vilified the way they are. And once you put a title on something, it makes it way more scary to people. Like, for example, like immigrants or something. Like, just terming people an alien makes it so that a whole country of people reject another group of people, even though we're the same kind of people, you know. But that's pretty much where I want to get to. So I'm really inspired by everything that I saw today. I've never really got into horror before, but it's like I see what it's about. It's about teaching a lesson, I guess, because it's like you said, it's fear is a major powerful motivator. So you have to. I kind of feel like you'll be satisfied as a film director when people see your movie and then they're like, man, I'm gonna have to think about how I'm living right now. You know what I'm saying? I have to change it up or something. You know what I'm saying? So that's it.
Oh, hi, how are you? Well, how are you guys? I'm Savion Marmal Grant. I'm working on a web series right now about two girls in Miami. One of them is not from here. I'm also not from here. I'm Jamaican. And I kind of wanted to show what it's like to come to this city because it's such a special bubble of of culture. And I feel like when you just walk into it, it's like, oh, oh, okay, you know. And I really wanted to show not just people here, but show people out of here what it's like in Miami and what it's like to coexist with all different types of people. Kind of like how New York City is such a special place to a lot of other people because of, it's everyone coexisting together. Not always in a positive way, but I really wanted to show the beauty of the mixing in Miami. That's what I mean. It's called Tamara and Maya. It's a working title. It's in pre-production right now, but we're on track.
My name is Xander Spivey. I just want to thank you guys for putting on this event. I'm a huge horror junkie, and when I actually saw it on your page, April, and I had to come. But
are you one of my Facebook friends?
no, Instagram. But I created a web series entitled Divination. That's one of the directors right here, Rohan Cornwall. We actually have won a couple of film festivals. We won the Best Supernatural web series for the Urban Film Festival. We won first place at the Black L'Oreal in Oakland. Official selection at the UK Web Festival. Official selection at the Asian Web Awards in Seoul, Korea. So I think that the black horror thing is a big deal. I think that for me tonight, this had put a lot of in perspective for me because I've always been a horror enthusiast, reading R.L. Stein, Stephen King, but then when I saw this tonight, it brought back all the memories from, Tales from the Crib, Tales from the Hood, all these different things, and I think that it's essential to show people of color in a different light in the horror genre, but I also think that sometimes it's not necessarily all about the color, but it is. You know what I mean? And I think that we as a people get lost in that sometimes. And it's not to denounce the things that happen, but I think that is definitely something that should be addressed. And so to show that we also can stand next to whoever and do just as good, even better than you can. So once again, the web series is Divination of Web Series, and thank you guys again for putting on the web.
I'm writing my book. it should be done next year. I write more fiction. I'm a history. I wasn't gonna say anything, but it's more fictional. So I'm more of a fictional writer. So I do a lot of research. I love research. I love reading books. I know a lot. God has blessed me. But I also like sci-fi. So I got a book called The Third Testament that I'm writing. So it's more of a biblical standpoint. It's gonna be it's poetry. There's a whole book is poetry. It's poem. So I look at Dante's Inferno. I love Edgar Allan Poe, Walt Whitman, Shakespeare. I read them all. I learned from them all. Even black authors, John Barr, I love Hughes. I go on and on, but I've kind of mixed all their styles together. I like to read the book. I learn people's styles. I like to dissect their writing patterns and style. So God has really blessed me, and I'm writing my book right now. And so that's all I'm doing. So I got other things going on, but we got as far as a nonprofit, we got a lot of things going on. But so we'll stay tuned. Stay tuned.
All right.
I just wanted to mention something. We were talking about the documentary earlier, and one of the things I left out is, especially when you're dealing with a playlist, just like with The Shining, just like with Carrie, and even Joe.